Hey everybody, it's the Yay Network 3 back for another week of the Yay Network weekly update. Cheers, guys, to
Cheers.
another week of podcasting.
We're drinking Bodabox Merlot.
If y'all don't sponsor us, you're fucking up, man. That's just
Don't get so aggressive with them.
Yeah, that's you don't want to be aggressive.
We love you. Your wine is
much.
amazing.
It is actually it's like legitimate. It's very
It's
good.
boxy Merlot.
Why are you
Yes,
dragging
boxy,
into
like a Volkswagen Jetta.
That's right.
A 90s Volkswagen Jetta.
I
You
was at
see
the-
that documentary about Volkswagen, how they lied about the diesel emissions?
No.
No.
It's a show called Dirty Money on Netflix.
Oh, I have seen that.
See, now we're getting off topic on the
Oh,
Focus,
updates. I'm
guys. This is
sorry.
the Yay Network weekly update. Welcome
My face
back.
looks fat.
If you haven't, this diet is clearly not working. We gotta try.
The
Something
lighting's
else.
not good either.
That's fair. So, like I said, we took 2 weeks off. I wanted to start doing this more frequently again. This is week 6 of our weekly updates. To be honest, not a lot to update this week. Just churning. We had 2 podcasts last week that went pretty well. From a content perspective, full disclosure, the numbers are a bit down this month. We think probably because there was a couple of scheduling conflicts where we had to record a little bit later. We moved to a different platform like we mentioned last week. So we went from SoundCloud to now we're using Buzzsprout. I think in the transition we might have lost, not lost data, but the numbers are not there. I will say this, the beta product for the iTunes Podcasting Connect analytics, not very accurate. It's up to this point. Like, I know we're getting more listens. I just know that because we were comparing the numbers in SoundCloud to the numbers in Podcast Connect, and they were way off.
Yeah.
But it's a beta product. That's how beta products work. Nonetheless, we're a little down this month, but we're not down. You know what I mean? You feel me?
I feel great.
It's
honestly like I'm not expecting us to like do Joe Rogan numbers yet,
Not yet.
but we will.
But I'm still riding off of the high from Black Panther, so I'm good to go.
I'm feeling so black and
you
proud
know,
and beautiful.
It's we get knocked down, but we get up again.
Wakanda
Wakanda.
forever.
I hate you guys. I haven't seen the movie yet.
See the movie.
I will watch it. I will
not a
watch it.
spoiler.
I will
this
watch
is
it.
not a spoiler. This is
I will
not,
watch it.
It's not like this is changes the movie.
This is equivalent to what I think like Matt looks like if he has a dream that's funny. So he's just like.
That's offensive to Wakanda.
That's a very internal joke. Anyways, we did do some work on our social media accounts this week. We're trying to improve that a little bit.
Yes.
Nikki's been doing a great fucking job on memes and just like creating
Amazing Photoshop
custom
skills.
Photoshop stuff specifically for NBA and the NBA Facebook and Instagram account.
I created some gifs.
Matt created some gifs that were actually amazing, very funny, and also very poignant based on what we talked about last week. We're committing to doing a lot more social media. We've been very focused and motivated to do more on social media because we recognize
We did start a Hootsuite account.
that's true,
Yeah.
which is going to be a huge help. I'm
Or
not
was
a
it
big
Buffer?
It was Buffer. Yeah, so
Buffer,
we looked at Hootsuite versus Buffer. I've never used Buffer, so I'm gonna try it out for a little bit. It's
They're
like
both
10.
free,
Yeah,
so.
well, we had to pay. So here's the one thing I will say about Buffer between Hootsuite and Buffer. You can add 5 accounts on Hootsuite for free. I had to pay $10 a month for Buffer because we have 6 accounts. So I will say that
gotcha.
because we have NBA, Twitter, Facebook, and then we have the Yay Network, Twitter, Facebook,
EA love Instagram.
and the EA Love Facebook page. But I didn't add the Instagram accounts yet.
Okay.
So because we have 6 accounts total, we had to pay $10 a month. Isn't much. We'll check it out. We'll see how it goes. I haven't
used
played with the
Buffer
UI.
before, though.
I'm only familiar with Hootsuite, so we're gonna try it out. If we need a transition, it's an easy transition. We're not really losing any information.
Yeah.
The one thing that I haven't seen from Buffer that I don't love that I prefer in Hootsuite is that you can create columns for your feeds.
That is
so
nice.
you can stay up to date on like what's going on in your respective accounts. That I prefer. Haven't seen that in Buffer. Maybe I'm wrong, but we got to play around a little bit more.
The thing is, Buffer is more like a scheduling product, and it's more for like finding content to share. Hootsuite is more like a social media management thing where you can like look at all your feeds in one screen.
Right. So you can do your scheduled posts and kind of the one-to-many, but you can also monitor your specific
I
accounts.
say we signed up for a free.
We should probably do it for both. We should do it for both. But in any case, we're really making a huge push in the social media realm. I've been doing a lot more engaging on Twitter, on the NBA account specifically. The NBA community is very active on Twitter.
Yeah.
By far. The food community is active on Instagram. So that's where we're putting a lot of our intent in terms of social media engagement, is more so on Instagram, and then on Facebook a little bit as well. We're starting to work on that a bit.
Also, I forgot to mention this, and what better place than on the Yay Network update? So I was thinking we should make an Eat Yay Love Pinterest.
I like that idea.
Yeah, that's definitely a good place for food. I find a lot of recipes on
And Pinterest is also Pinterest is an untapped social media market.
Absolutely.
For marketers. So bloggers will post their shit there a lot, like fashion bloggers and food bloggers and fitness bloggers, but marketers don't use Pinterest enough. The thing about Pinterest is the
web
only way
developers actually do too. Web
sure,
designers,
sure. But Pinterest only does well when the picture is an infographic or a really well orchestrated picture of, let's say, a dish or whatever.
Yeah.
But usually infographics do.
It's very. It's similar to Instagram where your content has to look good, but it's even harder because it needs to look good and also have some kind of graphics on it.
Which that's actually brings up a good point, because I have been making a larger effort on Snapchat and Instagram as well for my own personal account. I'm trying to, and I think we've all talked about and Nikki's done a really great job of this. Kudos to you. And Matt's really stepped it up on Twitter. But we're all trying to be better at our own respective social media accounts to build our personal brands. The goal being our personal brands lending to the Yay Network as a whole, and vice versa. So basically, a lot of crossover between the two. I gotta be honest, we talked about a lot more today than I thought we were gonna talk about.
I actually have another thing too. Another great tool. If you want to design pretty graphics, but you don't have any graphics design skills, a good tool is Canva. It's canva.com, and it gives you a ton of templates. I've made flyers, I've made Instagram stuff. You can make Pinterest stuff. You can make resumes. I made a resume on there. Cool. It's a great thing if you don't know how to design stuff. But I actually have been learning Sketch, which is it's it's similar to Photoshop, but it's vector graphics instead of raster, which is pixel based. Vector is math based, so the bigger, no matter how big it gets, it stays the same quality. And it is more geared towards mobile design and web design as opposed to photos.
It's a lot like Illustrator. The Adobe Illustrator is also vector based.
Yeah.
That's where my knowledge is.
yeah, similar to Illustrator, but Illustrator is more for illustrations. And Photoshop is technically for photos, although people use it for designing websites and apps. But a lot of designers are moving towards Sketch, so I've been trying to learn that. I've been using that to design the app actually.
Oh, a couple other things that I just thought about. We didn't really talk about last week. So we recognized that we were not doing a great job of creating show notes. Show notes are very important for creating awareness for your podcast, because if somebody doesn't know what your podcast is about, now granted, NBA, pretty clear, Eat Yay Love, a little less clear, but still fairly clear. It's difficult to get awareness to your podcast if you don't have podcast notes that describe what it is that you're talking about that week. So we've made a concerted effort to really push podcast notes, and what we found to be the most helpful, because we do record both podcasts on the same night, which is interesting. We joined a Facebook group for podcasters this week. It's called the Podcast Movement Community, I think, on Facebook. Just look up Podcast Movement and you should be able to find it. Nonetheless, we were invited by a friend of mine who's a part of the group and is friends with the organizer of the group. That being said, I had a lot of people asking me well, how do you guys have two podcasts? How do you spend that time? How do you find time to do two podcasts? One, we do little to no editing, so basically just editing in the music.
But we've actually even streamlined that,
and that's
to play
been streamlined.
The music.
Yep. So now because of our mixer, we're able to just play the music as we're recording rather than editing it post which I should have mentioned that on Facebook, but nonetheless, because of the mixer, we're able to edit the music or just play the music in the podcast and then just slightly edit it after the fact. But what I was getting at is the podcast notes were something that we would leave for after the fact, after we recorded both podcasts, and it just never got done. So we just had to take a good hard look and realize sure, it would be great to get home a little bit earlier or to go out and drink or whatever, but we know that the quality of the podcast and the podcast notes are so much more important. So we're now creating podcasts. Drinking while we put up podcast notes. Cheers to that. But we're making sure that we do the podcast notes immediately following the episode when it's fresh in our minds. Nikki does a great job of Nikki's kind of the creative portion of our team. He comes up with very much so. He comes up with a lot of the podcast names. All of them, actually. I don't think we've ever come up with one. Maybe one or two when we were out. But Nikki's come up with all the podcast names. He's done a great job of that. And because it's fresh in our mind, it allows us to put really good and, frankly, humorous podcast notes. It's easier to put down humorous podcast notes because it's fresh in our minds.
Yes.
So that's just a process thing that we've recognized that we need to work on.
Yes. Also, keywords and tags. Luckily with Buzzsprout it makes it very easy to add that stuff.
Can't say enough good things about Buzzsprout.
Yeah, there's a text field that says keywords. There's no such thing on SoundCloud, which makes sense because SoundCloud is not aimed towards podcasters.
Yeah.
If you're a podcaster, do yourself a favor, go to an actual podcast hosting source. No, all due respect to SoundCloud, but it's not aimed towards podcasters.
Yeah,
it's
SoundCloud's been good to us, but it's a good means to put your podcast out to the world. But in terms of your go-to podcast host, very easy to start there. But I would explore other avenues as well. I think
Buzzsprout actually does have a free plan.
Yeah, which I think is just especially if you're doing a once a week podcast and you only have one podcast, it should suffice for your podcasting needs. It's been great because now we can add tags. Not only can we add a description, but we can add a one sentence description, which shows up when you see the preview for the episode in iTunes. I can't say, full disclosure, I don't use anything else but the iTunes native podcasting playing app, so I don't know how it appears in other apps, but I would imagine...
I use Pocket Cast.
There you go.
Yeah, it'll show it in the table, but then when you click it, it'll show the whole thing.
Yeah, which I think is great because it gives people a quick understanding of what the episode is about. So usually I'll write or we'll write a one sentence description of what the episode is about. So for example, this week we had a mini-sode with some friends of mine from work. I wrote a quick description that says, Jay gets 5 of his most NBA knowledgeable friends together to discuss second half predictions, and that's it. Now we have further show notes to talk about what was discussed in the podcast, but the one sentence description makes it hugely impactful in getting a new listener. We'll see how that impacts our listens in the near future.
Actually, I've we said we didn't have anything to talk about.
This is
the episode longest video we've ever done.
I just remembered what we also did, and I don't think we mentioned this in the last episode, but we did it before that, is I actually went through each episode and basically normalized each name so it's the same format with each one. Before we had the name of the podcast, the name of the episode, and then, we had the name of the podcast, the episode number, and then the name of the episode, and if you looked at it in our iTunes feed, it would literally just say NBA, the NBA podcast, the NBA podcast, the NBA podcast. Nothing that's a terrible feed. It looks dumb.
It was it was long. A lot of shit got cut off.
Yeah. So what I did is I put the name of the podcast episode at the name of the episode, and then EP dash the episode number, and that makes the feed look much cleaner.
It looks prettier. It really does.
Yeah, and those things matter. I'm an iOS developer, so I care about user interface and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And that makes a difference. If I'm using an app and it has a shitty user interface, I'm deleting that app. If I'm looking through a podcast and I can't see what the episode is about by just looking at it, I'm not going to listen to the episode, especially if I come to a new podcast and I see oh, I'm not getting any information from these.
Right.
Yeah.
We did not get into a fight this week, so that was cool. Anything else we need to talk about before we let go? Oh, be on the lookout on the YouTube channel. We're gonna start recording our podcast live on YouTube and then posting them to YouTube as well as a podcast. So you'll now be able to. We're gonna start experimenting with the video version of NBA and EA Love as well as the audio version. We've had some conversations about maybe doing some Facebook Live as well. We might wait a little bit for that until we have an actual audience to present to. But at the same time, we might start a little bit sooner to build the audience. So that one we're still a little unclear on. But I think we do want to start distributing content to YouTube a little bit more. Full disclosure, I'm still figuring YouTube out. There's a lot that goes into YouTube in terms of